We'll go ahead and call to order the interim meeting of the NCOIL Property and Casualty Insurance Committee. Appreciate everyone's attendance. Will, if you want to go ahead and call the roll of the committee members.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just going to read quickly all the legislators that registered for the call. Alaska Representative Delana Johnson. Arkansas Representative Deborah Ferguson.
Yeah, I'm here.
I see. Thank you. Connecticut Representative Kerry Wood. Indiana Representative Matt Lehman.
I'm here.
Kentucky Representative Joe Fisher.
Here.
Kentucky Representative Derek Lewis. I did see him. I know he's muted. I do see him here.
He's on here. I saw him earlier.
Okay. Kentucky Representative Chad McCoy. I know he might be a few minutes late. He said he will be joining. Okay. Kentucky Representative Rachel Roberts.
Here, thank you.
Kentucky Representative Sherilyn Stevenson. Michigan Representative Kelly Breen. Michigan Representative Brenda Carter. Michigan Representative Brian Postumus. Michigan Representative Derry Rendon.
Dare Rendon is here. Thank you.
Michigan Representative Lori Stone. North Carolina Senator Jim Burgeon.
Here.
North Carolina Representative Chris Humphrey. Nebraska Senator Ray Aguilar. Missouri Senator Angela Mosley. Missouri Representative John Wyman.
Present.
Miss Mosley's, Senator Mosley, this is Chief of Staff, Jimmy Robinson. She should be present.
Okay, thank you. New York Assemblyman Ken Blankenbush. New York Senator Neil Breslin. New York Assemblyman Kevin Cahill. New York Assemblyman Steve Hawley.
Present.
New York Assemblywoman Pam Hunter.
Here.
New York Assemblyman Jarrett Gandolfo.
I'm here.
New York Assemblyman Steve Stern.
Here.
Ohio Senator Bob Hackett.
Here.
Ohio Representative Brian Lampton. Oklahoma Representative Brian Hill. Oklahoma Representative Gary Mize. Pennsylvania Representative Louis Schmidt.
Here.
South Carolina Senator Thomas Alexander. Texas Representative Tom Oliverson.
Here.
Wyoming Representative Bill Henderson. Vice Chair, North Carolina Senator Vicky Sawyer. And we have Kentucky Chair Bart Rowland.
Present.
So that marks everyone who registered. Is there any other legislators that I did not call?
Louisiana Representative Edmund Jordan.
Thank you, Edmund.
Representative Sherilyn Stevenson from Kentucky. I was just a few minutes late.
Thank you.
Former Representative Glenn Mulray is covering for the Oklahoma representatives.
Do we need Will, do we need a motion to waive the quorum?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion to waive the quorum.
So moved.
Second.
And we have a second. We can do this by voice vote. So all those in favor, waiving the quorum, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And motion is adopted. Okay. Well, thank you all again. A good afternoon. And I know that everyone's very busy as we all continue to deal with the pandemic. And a lot of us are waist deep in our legislative sessions right now. I really appreciate the large participation that we have today. Before we begin, I'll just say a few words about the agenda and the format for today's meeting. I'm proud to sponsor this model as it deals with such an important and timely issue. Every day it seems that another state has either passed legislation on this issue or is considering it since Congress has been able to reach any agreement. The last time I checked, the number was over 20 states that have either passed or introduced similar legislation. We're actively working on legislation in Kentucky right now that deals with this issue, and we hope to send something to the governor's desk very soon. We had a good discussion on this issue at our last meeting in December, where we heard from a panel of speakers with very different views on this issue. At the December meeting, we discussed the first draft of the model, which was largely based on what Idaho had adopted this past summer. However, everyone should have the latest version of the model, which was distributed last week. The latest version builds upon the first draft by adding some provisions from legislation that was introduced in my home state of Kentucky and in Representative Lehman's home state of Indiana. Specifically, we added a definition of the phrase arising from COVID-19, and we added more provisions to Section 3 relating to a reasonably prudent person standard and a rebuttable presumption that safety measures adopted were reasonable if they conform to the CDC guidelines in existence at the time of the alleged exposure. On that last issue, I know that some states have included language that applies a presumption to more than one set of safety measures. I think this is a good example of where an NCOIL model provides the framework for an issue for states to further develop. I personally like the idea that the model including the CDC guidelines for the presumption, and then states can add it if they so wish. Although we added those provisions, the intent of the model has not changed at all. We're trying to protect businesses and individuals that operate using the proper standard of care from frivolous lawsuits during a time in which they are extremely vulnerable as a result of pressures COVID-19 has put on them. Given the legal society that we live in, handling lawsuits during this time can be an existential threat for businesses that are already on the brink of survival. Relatedly, insurance policies should not have to pay for something that ultimately could be impossible for a litigant to prove in certain instances.
Larger
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. If you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Hello? If you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And even with the continued rollout of vaccines and improved treatment methods, I think we all know that the country will unfortunately be living with this virus for quite some time. However, conscientious businesses still must be able to function in this era of our new normal without the cloud of potential litigation hanging over their heads. That is not to say that there won't be instances where litigation is warranted, of course. If a business acts in a reckless or willful manner, liability can and should attach. But the businesses who want to reopen in a safe manner should be provided a certain level of immunity from COVID-related lawsuits. With regard to the format of today's meeting, we'll first hear any comments and questions from legislators. Once all legislators are finished speaking, we'll then hear any comments and questions from interested persons. Once all questions and comments are heard, I would entertain a motion to vote on the model. I think it's important for NCOIL to adopt the model today as a form of guidance, since more and more states are seeking to enact legislation on this issue. I will now turn it over to the co-sponsor of the model. That's Indiana State Representative Matt Lehman, our current NCOIL president, for some brief remarks. Matt.
All right, thank you, Chairman Rowland. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for jumping on today. Good afternoon if you're to the east of me, and good morning if you're to the west of me. We're right on that line. So I'll be very brief and make sure everybody has a chance to talk. I am proud to sponsor this with Chairman Rowland. I agree with your remarks 100%. It's important that the committee adopt this model today as more and more states consider this issue. Just yesterday in my home state of Indiana, our Governor Holcomb signed Senate Bill 1, which includes many foundational parts of the NCOIL model. And so I think Indiana, what we did is we kind of agreed that the economy simply can't function if businesses can't get back to work, providing those services without any fear of that lawsuit hanging over their heads. I know that there's been no litigation or very little litigation in this area, but we have to ask ourselves as legislators, tomorrow, the next week, the month after that, as America begins to open back up, I think it's very important that the reopening begin with a place like this, where as things get back to normal, where they're not looking over their shoulder. Having this in place, it gives a certain level of immunity to responsible businesses as we encourage them to reopen, and they can't function if they have to continually be concerned about their futures. I'm pleased that we added language to the model to build around some of the prior versions. States like mine and others have been doing a great deal on this issue in different ways. But as I've said before, and it's kind of been my story, is NCOIL, we built a great foundation. We let the individual state hang the curtains and the drapes. And I think this model represents that solid foundation for states to consider. And I think a great work is done here, and we can work, and then they can do it how they wish. So I strongly encourage the passage of this today. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Matt. So we will first see if there are any legislators on the call who would like to make some comments or potentially have some questions. I know that Representative McCoy from Kentucky has a question. Are you on here yet, Representative McCoy?
Yes, sir, Representative Rowland, I am.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. And I don't have a question as much as a comment. Those of you that were at the Tampa meeting in December may recall when this topic came up. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm a Republican trial lawyer. There aren't many of me, but I was sort of against the bill and had some comments. I just want to thank Representative Lehman and Rowland and everybody else that worked on it. I have reviewed this draft, gone over it, and honestly, I think it's a great bill. I think it strikes a really good compromise. It gives businesses the immunity they need, and from a legal standpoint, it gives an affirmative defense and a presumption. And I just want to say I appreciate everybody's work on it. I'm 100% for it, and I hope we adopt it as the NCOIL model.
Thank you, Representative McCoy. And I wanted to get to you first because I understand you may have to jump off the call early. Any other legislators on the call that have comments or questions? Will, do you have, are you getting messages from any legislator who has a comment or a question?
This is Representative Dare Rendon from Michigan.
Yes, ma'am. Please proceed.
Thank you. I have a unique perspective on this because aside from being a legislator, I have been a business owner for 35 years. And my company was able to work through the pandemic by implementing safety procedures. That being said, I understand that these things pop up and we really will need to deal with them. So I appreciate the comments from the previous speaker as well. I noticed in the material that was sent to us that we had some commentary from the PIA, Professional Insurance Agents Group, and I was wondering if their comments had been taken into account when drafting the final model for this.
Hey, Will, remind me, did those comments come in before the final draft or after the draft was submitted or what was distributed?
They came in after the final draft was distributed, I believe a day or two after.
And if I may, yeah, they addressed the definition of testing for COVID. And they also addressed the emergency, which they thought should be specifically named.
I understand, and I don't think any of us likely disagree with that. But what I think we have a good model framework here with the draft that's in front of us, and really that is all that NCOIL's job is to provide a framework. If individual states, even us in Kentucky, before we're finished with our final bill this session, we could certainly take those suggestions and incorporate them into our bill if our state felt like we needed to do that. And I think that's probably the best way to proceed.
Agreed. Thank you for that.
Chairman Rowland, this is Representative Derek Lewis out of Kentucky. I've seen firsthand all the work that you put in on this bill. I think it's a very proactive approach. Too often when we pass legislation, we were very reactive. And I just want to say this is a great model going forward. Representative Lehman, thank you for your work. Let's pass this thing and hopefully get it out to the states. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Lewis. One last call for legislator comments or questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is Representative John Weeman from Missouri. I just want to make one point. I'm not trying to say that this model legislation is not a good piece of legislation. I actually kind of like it, but I will tell you, I've been actively involved in our efforts in Missouri to push for COVID liability. We've got it almost passed out of the Senate. We're just waiting for it to be third read, and then I'll take over on the House side with our version. But one of the areas that we had a lot of problems with, but in our building, was dealing with the applicable standards. You guys are using the CDC. We had local health departments, and we caught a lot of flack over that. So I think that's the only area where you might have some issues with at least with us. We're not going to have it in our legislation, the applicable standard using a local health department or a government entity such as the CDC. So that was the thing that we had to deal with in our legislation. But I see that you obviously have it in here, and it, that's the standard you guys choose to use. That's the standard you choose to use. But I just want to let you know that that's something that we were grappling with, at least in Missouri.
Thank you, Representative. And we've had similar conversations in Kentucky on this bill and other pieces of legislation we moved early in session 2 around that. Discussions we had is you had to pick a standard, and everyone, I think, kind of felt like CDC was the right way to go. Certainly, again, any state that wishes to deviate from the model, absolutely their prerogative to do so.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can ask a question on that note to Representative Weeman, as you looking at different standards, you talk about maybe using local. One of the concerns we had in ours is, what if local standards go well below a CDC standard? So, for example, an area might say, well, we're going to be much more lenient, but it goes well beyond that. Would that immunity apply if they want to do things that really are so far below the CDC standard? So, we had that same discussion, to be honest with you, and that is really what standard do we want to use? And I think we ended up looking at it as the CDC is kind of the footprint or the thing everybody's kind of working off of. Then you can go one direction or the other. So we had the same discussions, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it led us down to a pretty good, robust discussion on really what happens when some places are more lenient and others are more stringent. And so, what ends up being, quote, the standard.
Thanks, Representative Lehman. And another good point is that this is a national model, and CDC is a national entity. Of course, some state may want to adopt state health guidelines as their model, and they certainly would be able to do that. If no more legislators have questions or comments, we'll open it to interested persons and parties that are on the call.
Mr. Chairman, this is Erin Collins from NAMIC.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. Again, Erin Collins from the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. We appreciate the opportunity to support this measure. We know the intent and the practical implication of these measures is to protect small business as we emerge from the pandemic and shield against frivolous lawsuits. I think it's important to note here, and I want to make sure to note that we concur with Representative Lehman that these are sensible and balanced provisions that create a structure that help us emerge from the pandemic. They don't, as some opponents of the concept I've heard argue, they don't create an invitation or protection for bad actors that put the public at risk. That's just simply false, in my opinion. So NAMIC does support this model. We urge adoption. We do have a couple of small suggestions that I've forwarded to Will for the committee's consideration and perhaps to Mr. Chairman, to your point, also to be considered by any legislators that want to use this as a framework and may consider some changes when applying it in the state. So first, we just want to ensure that the applicability covers those businesses that are acting in a volunteer capacity. We're really in an all hands on deck situation. So we're just suggesting in section 2 in the definitions where it provides for protection of volunteers that you may strike in response to government appeal and just add rather providing premises, products, or services for the administration of a test or vaccine for COVID-19. We also contemplated similar concerns, as have already been mentioned, about the CDC guidelines and perhaps conflict with the state or local protocols, but certainly understand your comments and Representative Lehman's comments that may be considered at the state level. Finally, we just want to mention that the rebuttable presumption and immunity afforded by the model should be tied to a person's good faith attempts to comply with the CDC or other guidance as a bill may dictate. The model does provide that language, but then inserts ordinary, reasonable, and prudent standard, which we think might muddy the waters a little bit and create some confusion. So we would just urge the committee to perhaps take a look at that and stick with that good faith standard. But again, really are supportive of this effort, agree that timeliness is important, and we would also urge the committee to move forward with the bill. So thank you very much for your consideration, and would just close by saying hope everybody's doing well and healthy and has less ice and storms than I know some of us do. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Aaron, for your comments. Next, I think Wes Bizzett with the Big I. Go ahead, Wes.
Thank you, Chairman Rowlands, and thank you to you and to Representative Lehman for the original introduction of this bill, and then for the good work that's resulted in the product that's being considered today. We support it as well. We'd urge you to take action on it today. I won't repeat all the comments that I made back in December during the meeting, but we do believe strongly that providing limited immunity for a small window of time is not only appropriate, but it would be helpful and eliminate a lot of the uncertainty and concern that small businesses are facing right now. Along the lines of what Ms. Collins said, we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good, but one thing we might urge states to do if they're looking at this would be to eliminate the references to good faith as they appear in 3A and to incorporate them, as Aaron suggested, in 3B. But we don't believe that that's the type of amendment that's necessary before you would move forward on this. So again, we thank you for your hard work and good work in the weeks since your previous meeting, and would urge you to adopt the proposal today. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Wes. I think Lauren with the Professional Insurance Agents of America has some comments. Lauren, are you on here?
Yes, hi, thank you. This is Lauren Packman, Counsel and Director of Regulatory Affairs for the National Association of Professional Insurance Agents, or PIA. We represent independent insurance agents in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. Like many of their clients, PIA members are often small businesses themselves. And we want to thank President Lehman, Chair Rowland, and Vice Chair Sawyer for their leadership on this issue. And thanks to them and NCOIL for the opportunity to address you all regarding the strain on businesses that has come from the pandemic and the resulting economic downturn. As we indicated in our written comments, which I think you have in front of you, we support the Model Act. The protections it affords will provide businesses with the assurance that they need to reopen confidently and without fear of frivolous litigation. As we all know, that kind of threat can derail businesses even in the best of economic times, and certainly now it poses a greater threat than ever to businesses that are already on the precipice of closing. We did have two small recommendations, and we thank Representative Rendon for her mention of them. And they are just adding a little bit more detail around the word testing in section 2 regarding the definition, and adding a little bit of detail around the state of emergency, just providing states basically with a template for filling in the actual state of emergency that's in effect, given that the model is specifically tailored to the current coronavirus pandemic and not say for an indefinite purpose or for an indefinite number of pandemics in the future. It seems to make sense that that you would give states more of a framework in which to fill in their details about what their current state of emergency looks like. As previously noted, we support the model. We urge NCOIL to adopt it, and for states to adopt similar models as quickly as possible. Those states that have not already done so. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you all today.
Thanks, Lauren. Do we have any other interested parties or even legislators on the call that have a comment or question? All right, seeing none then, I would like to move forward with passing this as an NCOIL model today. I would entertain a motion and a second on the bill.
So moved.
I have a motion for Representative Fisher.
Second.
Second, Representative Lehman. All right, we can do, I'm told by Will, we can do this by a voice vote. So if that's all right with the committee, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then likewise, those opposed. Hearing none, the motion does pass and the NCOIL model bill is adopted. Will, is there anything else we need to do on that issue?
No, Mr. Chairman. This will now be placed on the executive committee agenda for our final consideration at the spring meeting. So that's it for this agenda item.
Okay.
But,
thank you, Will.
For the legislators on the call, Mr. Chairman, who may be somewhat new to NCOIL, it would be highly unusual for changes to be made at the executive committee in April. So if you're interested in adopting, introducing the NCOIL model, this would be the form. You can be comfortable that this is the form of what ultimately will be the final NCOIL model for consideration in your states.
Thanks, Tom.
Sure.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
yes,
Ken.
Sir.
As a insurance agent owning a property casualty agency and a member of the Big I and PIA, do I have to abstain on this vote?
No, sir.
Am I okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
I'm in the same boat.
Okay.
I am too. I'm a member of both those organizations as well.
All right. Too. All right. Just needed the clarification.
Handful of us.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I got a couple more pieces of business before we adjourn. First, as you know, registration for the NCOIL spring meeting in Charleston, South Carolina is now open. The meeting will again be a hybrid format, allowing for both in-person and virtual attendance via Zoom. You can find all the registration information on the NCOIL website or by reaching out to NCOIL staff. Secondly, in December 2019, NCOIL adopted the Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Program Model Act, which I was proud to sponsor. The model has been very successful and been introduced and adopted in several states across the country. Recently, some amendments to the model have been agreed upon by both the insurers and the peer-to-peer car sharing companies, which I would like to sponsor and include on this committee's agenda for adoption at the spring meeting. Overall, the amendments aim to provide clarity and standardization of insurance coverage during the peer-to-peer car sharing transaction and deal with amending certain definitions in the model, clarifying state insurance limit, primary liability, and underwriting issues, and providing additional record-keeping requirements on the car sharing program. The specific language of the amendments will be included in the 30-day materials next month. And if you have any questions about that in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to me or to NCOIL staff. Is there any other business that needs to come before the committee today? Then seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Thank you all for attending, and we are adjourned.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everyone. Registration's open for April.
See everybody in Charleston.
See you all.
Bye-bye.